everybody. Happy Monday. Morning, Amy. Morning, Paul.
Good morning, everybody.
Andrea, Austin.
Looks like we have enough folks to get started, actually.
It does.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome to our, I don't know what month this is, March meeting of our leadership committee. Call the meeting to order at 11:01. Does anybody have any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to any public comment. I don't know that there's anybody from the public available or or GMT employee that wants to make a comment. Welcome to.
I'm representing the Colleen fan club, but I'm not going to make any comments this morning.
The Who fan club?
Colleen.
Okay.
I think he means Kim Clark.
You get the same emails I get.
Oh, yes. Yes, those are getting yeah, thank you. So we will move on to approval of the February 10th committee meeting. The minutes.
I'll move the approved as circulated.
Thanks, Paul.
I'll second.
Thanks, Andrea. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's an aye for me. Any opposed? All right, minutes are approved. And so we are moving right on to the discussion update on the legislative session. And I'm going to turn that over to Clayton.
Thank you, Amy. And so things are continuing to progress through the normal cycle at the State House. And since our last meeting, provided the GMT overview to the House Transportation Committee. That was a more positive experience. I think that it's certainly helpful that that we're going into went into that testimony mostly in alignment with VTrans, certainly in alignment in regard to our budget. Where there's differences on the rural transfer, they're pretty small. And so, and certainly we've had a lot that we were able to report on that we're doing, differently than we have in the past. So my impression is that the House Transportation Committee is seeing GMT moving positively and in the right directions. And one of the things that we will need to do is provide some input to the two different committees about the potential charter change language. And so again, we're very much in alignment with VTrans, but I think that one of the areas that we may want to, or that we may have slight disagreements is just in terms of timing. One of the things that we haven't communicated to Ross and Dan previously is our intention of not only doing a new assessment methodology for urban, but having whatever comes out of that discussion that we do with CCRPC this year, sort of informing some statutory changes to the assessment section of our charter. And so I think that it would make more sense for us to do that all at once. And so the governance committee met on Friday, and so Amy and Paul were able to be there. And so what we'll be asking is that that the timing for the statutory changes be in the next year's session, the 2026 session. I don't think that will delay any of the transfers. There is the potential for us to transfer Stowe seasonal service in September of 2025. But I'm not sure that just transferring, the seasonal service there would necessarily require legislative changes. The other area that I think that we may ask for something slightly different than what VTrans is asking for is with our area of operation. And one of the things that I think would be helpful would be having Chittenden County listed as our service area, and then service outside of Chittenden County would be designated through the state grant application process. And then that way we would be allowed to jump in and fill whatever was required. So we wouldn't necessarily have barriers of here's where we can operate, here's where we can't operate, and that there would be a process that VTrans already has in place that would sort of determine if there was a need for us to go back into providing rural transit. And I also know that we've had changes in the past in regards to what makes sense for commuter service. And so having it listed in statute that we provide commuter service, I think, again, it should be based on the state grant application process, because as we've seen with turning over the Middlebury Link and the Heinsberg commuter to Tri-Valley Transit, sometimes it does make sense to have the other providers do the commuter service. And so I'll be working on providing a written response on this week to the legislature with them coming back. And then also diving into this week will be on legislation that was introduced just before the session ended that covered a lot of transportation topics, that was introduced by some of the folks who have been more on the advocacy side for public transit. And so I will be meeting with the Crayson group to go over that tomorrow, and we'll let you know sort of what is happening there. But that's the update on how things are going. I continue to be very thankful for the advice that we're getting from Necrason. And I think that advice is, helping us be, a partner that's better for the legislature and VTrans to work with us. So I think that, in some ways their ability to inform us on the lay of the land, makes, gives us sort of it makes it easier for us to sort of stay in alignment with the expectations for both of those entities. So happy to answer any questions regarding legislation. Oh, I did forget that H255, the bill for transit workers, did get some attention last week with WCAX deciding to run a story on it. But my impression is from the latest news that I've seen, that this is likely not to make it over to the Senate before crossover. So I think that this legislation may end up, not finalized this year, but it may be next year, assuming that there's support for it as well. Paul?
Is there any movement on the Chittenden bill to add some funding to transit?
I have not seen any testimony on it, and so I'm not aware of any. I don't know if Ross has seen anything that I haven't. Ross?
Yeah, we are still making comments on H27, 427. It's covers a lot, and we have a lot of different programs in the agency who are reviewing now. But in terms of using a delivery fee specifically for public transit, I think that's we're deferring to our own budget committee and those efforts to see about all the different approaches and ideas to fund all of our programs. But that was good to see, from a public transit perspective. but I don't have any further comments on that. I would like to follow up a little bit on the change of timing that Clayton just talked about when we get there at some point.
And Amy, if it's okay with you, I think probably, hearing from us now would make sense.
Please.
Thanks, Amy. We hadn't heard about the idea of changing the legislative language that we'd provided testimony on for the last few months until Friday's governance meeting. And you can imagine after a couple hours of testimony at the House and just a little bit at the Senate, we thought this was a fait accompli, and we were requested to hand the language over that was contained in the Stedman Hill report to the House Transportation Committee and Chair Walker. So we had anticipated that that language would be changed. We could proceed with the rural transfers with everyone understanding that the legislation is in place to allow for that. And certainly it doesn't preclude us from using the grant process this year or in future years to award rural services elsewhere. None of our rural providers have their communities outlined in statute, and so we're just bringing that to fruition was a big step so that RCT and TVT know that this is possible under the current framework starting in July. And so based on the recommendations, the board taking a position of neither opposing or supporting those recommendations, and VTrans moving forward with our own policy director to get those updates made. I'm just curious about the rationale stating, let's wait and do more for another round next session rather than, letting these changes take place now. As discussed, we spent a lot of time talking about these rural transfers and then further studying assessments, options, opportunities for review next year. We don't see any downside in reviewing your language 2 years in a row, 5 years in a row. The T-bill's written every year with amendments and changes as well. And so just curious to find out a little bit more about the rationale to move this to next session.
I think certainly one of the things on our part, Ross, is that, have we heard definitively from TVT and RCT that they're willing to accept the service? Because, I met with the TVT or some members of the TVT board last week, and it seemed to me very clearly that they had not made a decision on this yet.
Yeah.
And so it felt to me that moving forward with statutory changes when the other boards have not yet, made a decision seemed a little premature and would potentially, force them to sort of accept a change that they have not yet, weighed in on.
Sure. Well, one of the things is that this recommended update to the legislation doesn't put TVT in that position or RCT in that position. It just allows for it to move forward. And that's why we did the coordinated implementation assistance plan with Steve Fauble, a kickoff meeting tomorrow, to ensure that each board has what they need to feel comfortable to move forward. RCT certainly seems ready to move forward with the planning process. TVT, as described to me by Jim Moulton and some of their board members, is they have a lot of unanswered questions, and that the coordinated assistance plan would answer those questions that they're rolling up now. So again, we can move forward with TVT in the Washington County area this year or next with this language change. This language change does allow us to tell the boards that, yes, we are cleared for takeoff here, rather than, oh, let's do this plan, and then maybe next year we'll change the legislation. It just changes things. And I think getting to yes would be easier with this change in this session, especially since we have spent a lot of hours in front of the committees talking about what needs to happen, and additional changes at this time after crossover may not be looked upon so favorably. But I understand where you guys are, I just don't see why anything would change based on where we need to be with this language outline.
And so would the expectation then be, Ross, that with the change in statute, that if we decide later on this year that transfer is not necessary, the change in statute doesn't force us to go down the transfer path? And that part I agree with, since it doesn't specify who will take, over service.
And that's the key is flexibility, and we just don't have it with this writing now. And so if we did see an opportunity through the coordinated implementation plan, like let's change these routes a little bit earlier, or let's change this route in 2 years' time as we get all of our ducks in a row, all of that would be allowed under this new language. And so, yeah, it just frees up the flexibility for the rural awards and for those organizations. We wouldn't want to name TVT or RCT because we named GMT with these communities before, and now we have to go back. There's a good reason why we keep these regions in a position where we can make changes, as we have for 15 years. I think about Northwest Transit or Brattleboro Transit, Deerfield Valley, Actor. They've all been subsumed and joined with other regions, similar to what we're trying to do here. We just can't because of the statute.
Paul, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add. I think there was conversation that was really, from my perspective, hesitant to go back to the legislature twice to change our charter. We want to make sure that it's cleaned up, and wanted to just kind of have the whole thing to present to the legislature instead of going back one time and then coming back again and having them wonder why we didn't have our ducks in the row the first time. So I think there's more planning that we wanted to do, and a little bit more thoughtful, so that we make sure that that we're able to serve our community, but not have random communities named in there, so that we, if things change and we are not able, then we're not following our own charter. So that was a big conversation, a point behind the conversation. Paul, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
Well, Amy, I agree with that. And I think just thinking where we are with our charter amendments, I'm not sure that our governance committee, I think that's where that was stashed, has made any recommendations, because there are a number of areas in the charter that may be more like housekeeping, but should be done. And whether we can get that done in time to join with what VTrans is putting together or not for this year, but would the legislative committee of jurisdictions think poorly if we came back again next year with another charter change?
I think they would not only expect it, but would appreciate those ongoing concerns and reviews, given that GMT now focusing on urban, your charters changed, business models changed. We're going to have funding approaches recommended in bills and through the public process. And so I think they would not, be at all disappointed to see more language change as it relates to GMT statute here, especially since this is a big undertaking. We've been talking about this since last August, and the report and the recommendations and the updated statute has been in front of the board since November, if not before. And so again, I don't want to let perfection get in the way of the good, and this is a good step to allow for the plans and the recommendations to take place without having to wait another 10, 12 months plus to get this in place. It may be easier to do two changes with bite-sized pieces rather than an omnibus large scale change that could get drawn out into long discussions depending on how far they go.
So thinking about the feedback that we want to provide to the legislature, I do think that it does make sense to have the first section of our statute that governs our area of operation amended as suggested, because I don't see that, forcing anything. And so I could see us sort of pivoting and then perhaps having a telegraphing to the legislature that we will be back, with, urban adjustments. But at this time, we're just focusing on the rural. I could see that potentially being, one pathway, but I think that we just need to, make sure that, both from Green Mountain Transit's perspective and TVT and perhaps less so from RCT, that, that any of the language going through is seen as allowing for transfer, but not requiring transfer.
That sounds kind of reasonable to me. Ross, I know that this feels very done deal, the transfer. To you, it doesn't feel done deal to us. We're still waiting for all those pieces to get aligned and to hear from the legislature. And so it's really hard to plan for what hasn't yet happened. And from my perspective, there's an element of unknown here that there's still a chance it could not happen. Not based on what we're advocating for, but just the pieces may fall apart. And so I'm not, I don't feel it's as done a deal as I think you do. And so wanting to guide our steps a little bit more cautiously.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Amy. And the done deal is not this is going to be completed. It's we need to move down the process and to say, okay, TVT and RCT, we have the legislation in place. We've got the coordinated implementation plan. Here are your questions. Let's answer those questions. We do have a report that was done by, our lead consultant for 2 decades, stating that there could be savings. And we know that there will be savings to the administration of the program. And we know that there's an opportunity to improve services and coordination on our demand response services as well. So I feel we need to run toward that because like GMT Urban, we're faced with about a $1.5 million shortfall in FY26, and maybe another 1 million or 2, depending on how these applications come out in 27. And so if I need to go to the budget committee in August of 26 in just a few months and state, we got the extra $1.5 million for 26 last year with one-time funds. We're moving through this transfer. We hope this will save some money. We have a roll-up of activities to save other dollars with backroom and other approaches that we've done through Vermont Public Transit Association in the past. And as a result, that would give me a much better argument to find this next normal or post-COVID, post-inflation number to sustain all services, including urban. So if we're looking at 2-3 million shortfall, if I cite $1 million or $500,000 in potential savings, and the $1.5 million in cuts that we're due to make in the rural services for 26, I think I could make a much better argument and maybe be more successful through our budget committee by showing a momentum of effort on efforts just like this rural transfer. I don't do it because TVT is preferable over GMT. I work with all the staff throughout the entire state and 400 employees, including drivers. And if this was turned around, we could look at potential savings through any other move. Then I would look to make those changes as well as the program manager who is charged with trying to find the most efficient, best level of service throughout the state.
I hear you. I know that your goal is that, and I think we are wanting to make sure that we continue to provide the best service that we can and all those elements that we all subscribe to. So, we didn't mean to blindside you on Friday, but just wanted you, just to the rationale was really to be very thoughtful in our process so that we're not making mistakes or going too fast. And so unless anybody else has any more to say on the topic, we do need to go forward to talk about other agenda items. Okay. We're going to move forward to talk about our rider engagement committees.
Yes. You know, so the Jedi Committee has, you know, evolved a lot over the past year. We invested in having an outside facilitator come and, you know, sort of guide us through decision makings and structures, you know, like as far as what the committee wants to look like. I feel like the committee has been, you know, getting some momentum. And then, of course, we have a change in federal administration. And so the good news is that the timing of this is such that there was already sort of a hunger for change on the committee to sort of get Jedi to its next, you know, steps. There had already been consistent calls from some of the committee members to have Jedi be more local. So with the feeling that having Jedi, you know, a single committee try to, you know, provide input across 5 counties was too much, and that, you know, like the input that riders and community members would have in Washington County is very different than Chittenden County, and so there was already sort of this groundswell of a need for change, and so we had our last Jedi committee meeting last week, and the committee endorsed moving forward with rider engagement committees. And so these committees would be focused on the rider experience. This would return sort of the employee Jedi coverage or advocacy, I should say, to our CBAs, our collective bargaining agreement. So there's, you know, pathways there for handling discrimination, to our EEO officer, you know, to handle employees. And so these new committees, unlike Jedi, would be focused, you know, on the external engagement. And what we would end up happening is in Washington and Franklin counties, a combined rider and partner groups that, and in Washington County, that would be chaired by Monica. And in Franklin County, we didn't have any Jedi members from Franklin County, so we're going to need to find, you know, people from scratch there and determine which staff member, you know, would be appropriate to lead that. And then in Burlington, because just the scale is big enough that we felt that we could have separate rider group and partner group, so that we'll have a rider engagement group that will be consist entirely of riders. And then we'll have a partner group that will consist of, you know, partners like the hospital and Howard Center and stuff along those lines. I have to say, I'm really, you know, pleased that even though none of us like the fact that we had to, you know, change Jedi because of external circumstances, there seemed to be a lot of positivity in the room about what we are moving towards. And so the way we left things would be that I would be drafting a rule to go to the governance committee for their March 28th meeting that would establish these committees. And then hopefully we will start working on them. And assuming that the governance committee agrees and then the full board is able to approve in April, then we'll start these committees in May. And so I have to say, I'm pretty, you know, pleased with the direction that that they're moving in under the circumstances. So I wanted to let you all know and make sure that you had an opportunity to ask any questions early in the process.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Paul.
I'm just thinking that this may be a really good direction. I'm not sure that the organization got a lot of positive out of the JEDI process. I know we had a couple days of training, and I think what that did was expose some of the inequities that we see in our workforce. But I'm not sure what other positive outcomes have come to that. Well, this seems like it has more possibilities to have a positive impact on our riders and our communities, but also on our organization. So I'm hopeful this will be a good thing going forward.
Anybody else have any comments? I want to, in this new day and age, I saw a lovely list of all the terms that seem to draw fire from the federal government currently, and I certainly want to be sensitive to that. But I also want to be sure that, the reason we were looking at issues related to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion is because there's a need to look at those elements. And so as we move forward, I want to be able to have voices on those committees to be diverse, and that we continue to look at harm that might come from, just from natural biases, or, systemic biases. So I want to make sure that, as this sounds more positive, it could be more positive, especially if we're not careful and we leave out the people who are most harmed by poor policy or poor implementation of policy. I guess I'm stumbling around saying, like, let's be careful to be inclusive in how we build these committees so that we don't lose that voice.
And I think that, what we talked about is being inclusive in our viewpoint that at its root, this is all about everyone in our community should have access without barriers, and good customer service.
Yep, perfect.
And so, and that if any, segment of the population is not receiving that, then that needs to be a concern. And I think that, and there are areas that we can still kind of have diversity in membership because we, for example, the FTA, wants us to have reduced fares for folks who are disabled, for folks who are older, for folks who are younger. So we can include, hey, that we want our ridership, experience committee, to have, representation from our discounted riders. And, so there, it won't be like there won't be any factors included to make sure that we are casting a wide net.
Other thoughts, feedback? Okay. I'm waiting to decide whether Bob's finger was unmuting us or just moving us around.
It appears to me he's flailing around for some reason.
You are muted, Bob, so we can't hear you. Okay, he's good. All right. So thank you for helping to take those committees to a next step, which will help make them more functional. And thanks for listening to me as I hope that we continue to make them inclusive of everyone's voice. And so we'll move on to strategic planning. And I believe last month we talked about it. I admitted to you all I don't have skills in this area. And I think we were supposed to look at the strategic plan from some time ago, but I don't know that I had that. Austin, were you gonna find that for us?
Sorry, struggling to unmute.
Okay.
No, I don't think I was going to find that. And I think actually the strategic plan that we had predated my time because my time is more putting out fires than planning, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, this might be a short discussion, so forgive me. Let me see if I have that, because I think perhaps that conversation proceeded everybody except for Paul and Bob.
I might be able to dig up a copy, but it'd probably be more efficient if staff were to dig up a copy and circulate it.
And Bob, you were were you the strategy chair or the last time the strategy was updated?
Okay, now I gotta figure out how to unmute this thing.
You're
that work?
unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my struggle is I've never used my phone to do Zoom, so I have no idea what's going on. So yes, I probably had the last strategic plan. I would have to go digging too, and I can go do that. In fact, when we went through it in the strategy committee about a year ago, I think the one I found was even an out of date one, but I can go look.
Well, we did,
there-
Andrea did post what we have on our website, which is from 2019. So if that's the most recent one, then, and then, so maybe what would make sense, not to volunteer Bob, would be to kind of have him walk us through the last one that we had at our next meeting as the sort of the topic.
I'm gonna have a conflict at the next meeting, just like I do this. Once I get past April 15th, I'll be able to do that. How's that?
Yeah, and since I also have been around, if somebody, I am looking for it, and if somebody could just point me in the direction, I can take it from there, I think. But I'm also not finding anything updated in my files, which are poor at best.
Okay.
We will, I'll confirm with the group that the 2019 is the most recent, and if it's not, then we'll get that and distribute to the folks here.
Okay, and then we will pick up the conversation from there. Forgive me for not being prepared for that conversation.
No problem.
Okay. Any other thoughts besides starting place on strategic plan, or should we leave it for now?
Sounds like a plan to plan.
Okay. All right, we're going to plan to plan. Thanks, Paul. That's a perfect summary. And then the last real big agenda item on our agenda is a personnel matter. So that would be, I believe, talking about the evaluation of our performance evaluation of our general manager, unless there's something else. No, that was it. Okay. And so because it's a personnel matter, we don't need a finding, correct? We can. Okay. And then I would suggest, for the sake of this conversation, which is really just getting everything started, that it'd be board members and Stephanie maybe to kind of walk through that and let all other people go. The only other things following our this executive session would be commissioner comments and adjourning. So if folks who are ready to leave are welcome to leave and not have to plan to return. Unless we would just need somebody to finish recording when we come out of executive session. And maybe Stephanie could be that person. And
so will I be departing, or because I will need to make somebody host?
I'm comfortable with you departing.
Okay.
This meeting only.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And if you could make Stephanie host. Stephanie, is that cool with you? That's with the finger. Okay. And then we will see you when we see you. So I think we just need a motion to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter with board members and Stephanie included.
And
So we need a finding for, oh, sorry.
Before I do that, I just want Stephanie, do you, now that I've made you co-host, do you see the button to stop the recording?
I do.
Okay, then I will jump off as soon as the motion passes.
We need a finding first and then a motion to enter, right? No.
Because it's a personnel matter, you don't need a finding. You just have
Okay.
to say executive session to discuss a personnel matter.
I will introduce a motion to enter executive session to discuss a personnel matter.
Second,
Okay, all those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. We are headed into executive session. We'll stop the recording at 11:41.
Hi,
And we'll wait
everybody.
until Monica and Clayton get 20 extra minutes.